trolleys? Your favorite drive-in? Going to a show at the old municipal auditorium? Remember when radio was new? When a TV set was like magic? Remember cheering your lungs out at Herndon Stadium or Grant Field? Remember high school? Remember sodas with your sweetheart? Remember the way we were. For a city like Atlanta, the only constant is change. Part of us knows that. And yet, we're never prepared for things like the end of Rich's downtown. First the closing, then the store for homes reduced to rubble. So let's be grateful that memories can outlast bricks and mortar. You know, it's not hype when they use the term rapid transit or MARTA. You can get anywhere, even though Atlanta has become a big city. Anywhere in minutes. It used to be the trolleys were the ultimate in transportation. Weren't quite as fast as MARTA, but they got the job done. You know, a funny thing, when you talk to anybody about Atlanta in the old days, they always mention the streetcars, the trolleys.
We just love the trolleys. In fact, when we came to Atlanta as children, we can still remember, you know, the noise of the streetcars. We were so intrigued by that. We can also remember the horses' hoofs, you know, in the horse-drawn carriages and wagons and things that they used to haul ice and coal and things like that in those days. I can still hear the sound of those hoofs on the pavement. But we loved the clang, clang, clang of the trolley.
Well, that was the original cars where you could use your rope. You could play a tune on it. Used to be some men, old operators that operated on the main Decatur line, that they played a tune on their bell all the time. And you could, just like the story of the railroad engineer of Casey Jones, he used to blow his whistle and everybody knew who it was on that train was Casey Jones. Well, some of these old men who were operating the two-man cars, they would clang that bell, just a tune all the way there and back, and everybody knew who it was on there.
We used to hear the clanging of the bells. We'd go down here to the end of the street. When you got to the end of the street, of course, you know, the streetcar was so big you couldn't turn it around, and it was fixed where it would go both ways. So he'd go by and push all the seats forward, go in the other direction, go outside, take down the connection to the wire, and then let it up in the back, and then head back into town.
Trolleys were sleek and streamlined, but even in the earliest days when the technology was new, they were never intimidating. And besides that, the conductors made you feel right at home.
We always knew the conductor. You know, he always, is this the street you all want to get off today? And they were just, it was very personal, very nice. It couldn't have been better service.
Well, I related extremely well to streetcars. And I don't know, I guess a steel wheel on steel rails always appealed to me. When I was a boy, I rode every streetcar line in Atlanta just to see where it went. And the fare was 5 cents. I remember the first jump, not a very large one, was 1 cent to 6 cents, then to 7 cents, and finally to a dime.
For most of us, trolleys were a big part of everyday life.
We had the Stone Mountain streetcar. We had the Marietta streetcar. Well, when we was in pharmacy school, it was not unusual for us to skip a class, go out and get on the streetcar and go to Marietta, a bowl, a game or two, and return. And that was rapid transit, too. I mean, they moved, and they moved in a hurry, including the one to Stone Mountain. And it was a lot of fun back then.
Sometimes a trolley trip was a special occasion. A turkey ticket would take you downtown for the start of the big Christmas sales.
In those days, there were no shopping malls, shopping centers. Everybody came downtown to do their shopping, like Rich's and Davison's and J.M. High's and different stores. And on the day after Thanksgiving, which was the biggest day of the year for sales and shopping, people would come downtown in hundreds and thousands. And the company had a policy of a ticket that they issued, which was, they called it a turkey ticket. And if you boarded the car before 10 o'clock in the morning to come downtown, you were given a ticket to use to return if you used it before 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so they put on extra cars for that day, had everybody working that they could. The cars would fill up before they got halfway to town, and you'd just have to leave people standing for the next car. You'd come downtown and you couldn't walk on the sidewalks. People shopping and in stores, and it was just a big day for the city of Atlanta, day after Thanksgiving.
We like to hear trolleys. We like to ride trolleys. We like to watch them. And now, so many years later, the trolley is like an emblem of lost Atlanta. The city was smaller. Life was simpler. Its rhythms were slower and sometimes even sweet.
When I was 5 years old, I started taking piano lessons at the Atlanta Conservatory, and Miss Elizabeth Hobson was my teacher. And so I couldn't read then, but I could read the sign on the streetcar that said Magnolia Street, and I just knew the look of that. And so I would go into town, take my lessons, and I'd go across the street and buy some candy at the dime store, then go back at the Flatiron Building and wait for the streetcar to come. And I would take that streetcar home. And Mother trusted me at 5 years old to go to Atlanta like that.
What would we do without fast food these days? It's become as American as apple pie. But there was a time in years past when we weren't in quite such a hurry to eat. We'd go to, maybe the Varsity or the Pig and Whistle, and we'd drive in and not through. Or maybe we'd run down to the corner drugstore and sit at the soda fountain. The menus weren't fancy, but the food was wonderful.
I started right here on this corner of Highland and St. Charles when it was Cox's Drugstore, and I was a curb service boy. I was carrying food and drink out to the cars. They were angled parked in those days, if you can believe that, and we had cars parking both on the Highland side and the St. Charles side. And I would take these drinks out and hang them on the side of the cars on these old trays. And so after about a year and a half of that as a curb service boy, I was promoted to a soda jerk and went behind the counter, actually operating the cash register, which I thought was a great indication of trust in me, making all of these wonderful sodas and milkshakes and sundaes and sandwiches and so on. You would either sit at a table like this or up to the counter, and you'd say, I want a chocolate ice cream soda with vanilla ice cream. And you would get it with whipped cream and a cherry on top. Or a banana split, perhaps. And you might specify what you wanted on the banana split.
And the local soda fountain was a good place to socialize.
They became gathering places. During Prohibition, and that was much of the early part of my life, there were no bars. So the drugstore, where people could come together and sit down, office people downtown, and the Jacobs Drugstore there at the corner of Marietta and Peachtree, and the First National Bank building.
They had a soda fountain. They had marvelous breakfast and the best chicken salad. Oh, we used to go down late afternoon after we'd finished work at the bank and have chicken salad sandwich before we had dinner. But the chicken salad was marvelous, and the breakfast, the grits and the great, and the scrambled eggs and bacon and sausage, and we loved to go there for breakfast. And soda fountain, we'd have banana splits.
Banana splits.
Not surprisingly, a major attraction at the fountain was Atlanta's own Coca-Cola.
Well, I never will forget when I had my first Coca-Cola in Atlanta. A crowd of us, we were in high school, and we'd gone to the Fox Theater to the movies. And so after that, we went into this little drugstore on the corner there, and from the Fox Theater. And we weren't allowed to have Cokes when they first came out because I don't know why my mother thought there'd be something wrong with them. But we had our first Coca-Cola then, and it was a fountain Coke because it was just great. And from then on, though, we started drinking them, and Mother drank as many as anybody.
You'd come up and you'd say, give me a strawberry milkshake, or give me a Coke float, or a brown cow. That was a Coca-Cola and chocolate ice cream. And I would open the little frozen food section. It was stainless steel on top with 5-gallon things of ice cream in it. And I would dip up the ice cream and make a brown cow.
Well, I guess Coke would probably be the most popular thing that was ordered behind the fountain. And it would be ordered with the lime, Coke with chocolate, lemon, olive, celery, Capudine, ammonia, almost any other thing. Of course, the ammonia and the Capudine would be used particularly with people with headaches wanting a little stimulant. It was very good at that time.
Ammonia? Somebody would purposely drink ammonia and Coke? I can't imagine that. But if you say so, I believe you, but it's nothing I've ever heard of.
We shared a drink, 2 straws. If you had a date, that was the thing to do.
One of the most frequent calls for drinks was, give me a dope and cherry. That meant a Coca-Cola and cherry. Now, naturally, the Coca-Cola company didn't care much for that, and it finally died out.
And it really didn't have any dope in it. It's just the way that we learned to ask for it.
And the company didn't like Coke much either. They wanted you to say Coca-Cola. But Coke was so widespread and wouldn't die down, so finally the Coca-Cola company made it their second trademark. But most of the customers at these drugstores, manned by young soda jerkers, were there for soft drink, chocolate milk, and a banana split was an A+ ultra. I mean, if you ordered a banana split, you were kind of big time.
And you had to save up your spending money, to get that.
We loved going to drive-ins. For a lot of us, they were important personal landmarks in Atlanta.
Governor Talmadge, when he and Betty married, they were at their reception at the governor's mansion, and so they decided they were tired of all of that and they wanted to go to the Varsity. So they came to the Varsity to have their dinner before they went on their honeymoon.
The Varsity was over on the left, Joe Cotton was on the right, Pilgrim was on the right of Joe Cotton, and you'd go back down the street, you had Techwood Theater, you had Junior's Grill, and then you'd go on up to corner of North Avenue and Hemp Hill. It used to be the Yellow Jacket. The Yellow Jacket was on one end of a pure oil station up there. They caught their cars on the street.
My father was a connoisseur of a great hot dog. I mean, and it was real important to him. And we always, I think on Thursday night, went to a place called the Yellow Jacket, which was about 4 or 5 blocks further down North Avenue from the Varsity. And the reason we went there, and the reason he liked it, was they toasted the hot dog buns. And at the Varsity, you couldn't get a toasted hot dog bun. So they would make the hot dog, they'd put the hot dog in the bun, put the chili on it, and whatever, and then put it in this press thing that toasted both sides of the hot dog bun. And my father considered that the proper way to eat a hot dog. So that's where we went.
The Cotton Patch and Joe Cotton's Drive-In were popular eateries. Joe Cotton's wife remembers.
They would come in and they would ask what so-and-so was, and they'd say, well, I'll try it. Like the Brunswick stew. Some of them had never even heard of Brunswick stew. The rush hour was over, and these people came in, and there was a grandmother with them. And so the waitress came in, and she said, Mr. Cotton, this lady out here wants to speak to you. So Joe went out, and she said, what in the world is this Brunswick stew? And so he told her, and he explained to her how it was made, and what it contained and all this, that, and the other, and she said, well, I'll try it. So then she, when she got ready to leave, she said, I'm coming back to Atlanta someday just to have the Brunswick stew.
Going to a drive-in was an event, and ordering inside could be a treat, too. But you had to keep up with the fast pace at the counters. Some folks were overwhelmed.
Most of the time you ask them, what do you have, what do you have? And he said, give me the same thing. He said, you want a drink? He said, what you have to drink? He said, yeah, I'll take one. So he confused, so otherwise you just sell him mostly anything you want to sell him. He'd be happy. What do you have, what do you have? And then they asked me, I said, what kind of drink you have? He said, what kind you have? I said, cocoa, orange, chocolate, frosted, sweet milk, buttermilk, slit, bud, Miller's, pepper, ribbon, black, white, coffee, little tab, stroll, light, cool, no bill, like that. And he'll pick them out when I said, which one you want, the second or third? And he said, and I said, well, give him a Coca-Cola.
The Pig and Whistle with which I was most familiar was on Ponce de Leon, but there was a second one on Peachtree Street. Well, the way I got to go was that my best friend had been given a car for her birthday. She had a LaSalle. Nobody knows now what a LaSalle was. But we would drive up, honk the horn. The young boy would come out and take the order, and you got either a pork sandwich or a beef sandwich. You could get chipped, sliced, or outside that was crusty and good, with sauce or with sauce on the side. And the buns were big. They were not like little bitty White House buns. They were big. Generous sandwich for $1. The beef sandwiches had a toothpick with the little blue frizzles on the top, and the pork was either green or pink. I don't remember. I think pink for pork would probably be proper, blue for beef. But they were delicious, and they had a fudge cake that was out of this world. It was pound cake with ice cream and a good hot black fudge sauce on it. And that set you back $1 for the Coca-Cola and the sandwich, and another dime for the fudge cake.
The Varsity was the ultimate drive-in, the largest on the planet. There were parking spaces for 350 cars. The car hops delivered thousands and thousands of hot dogs and hamburgers every day.
Most of the business was, in those days, because the inside of the Varsity was so small, it was just a serving counter and stand-up counters, that women didn't come in. So if you came with your date or your family, you parked in curb service, and the lot was very large and had awnings, and we had over 100 curb men. And there was a tower. Daddy came up with the idea of a tower, so there was someone in there that could see the whole lot and could direct the traffic as well as direct to the curb guys where a customer was. And they'd say, you know, pick up in Snellville, which was an area of the lot, and pick up in Football, which was an area of the lot which was near Tech, and the middle and the lower, and they knew where to go. And then he came up with the idea of numbers. So, and everybody remembers that, when they pull in the Varsity, the guys would either jump on the car, which they don't now and didn't so much then, but when cars had running boards, they'd jump on the car and ride with the car to their spot, and they'd throw their number up on the back of the car. And that way, the customer knew you waited on them, and also the curb men knew where to take the order.
The star car hop at the Varsity was Flossie May.
And Flossie May was the one everybody hoped that he would hop on their car, on the bumper. We had bumpers then on cars.
Running boards.
Running boards, okay, that's good. Running boards. And, but if you didn't, he would always visit, you know, go up and down the line of cars parked there, waiting, hoping he would get on. But if he didn't, then he always spoke to everybody.
You had to have Flossie wait on you, or you just hadn't been waited on. And he had his crazy hats and sang the menu, and everybody loved to come and hear him.
Flossie May, also known as John Wesley Rayford, is retired now, but he hasn't forgotten his Varsity days.
Nothing sold over 12 hours old. Then I always wanted to remember that all this and glassware are washed and steamed through a post-war $10,000 machine. Now, may I ask you, will you allow Flossie May to give himself at ease from the position of attention and serve you while you rest? Anything, please.
I remember a story about the shortage of ground beef during the war, and we made so many tons of chili that there wasn't enough ground beef to keep this up. So Daddy had been up north or somewhere, and they served relish on hot dogs. And he decided this would be a great idea, and he ordered relish, and he ordered like a truckload of relish, and he sent some here and some to Athens. And no one ever used the relish, and the relish sat in the cases forever. And I think that's why it's never been added to our menu.
We went to the Varsity for the fabulous food and the fun of the drive-in. But some of us went for romance, too. It was a hot spot for flirting and dating.
And at night, when we drove in, they had a single bulb hanging from a little old electric line, and that was the light. If you wanted to spoon a little bit, why, you moved further down the lot, where there were no bulbs hanging from the electric lines. And it was a favorite hangout.
Well, we'd been going there for a while, and he looked up at me, and I looked up at him and said, "You gonna eat onions?" I said, "You gonna eat onions?" And then we both decided to eat onions, and then he says, "What about us getting married?" And I got all excited, naturally. So then we kissed, because we both ate onions, and the rest is history.
Atlanta is one of the top radio and TV markets in the country. And we are at CNN International serving the world from Atlanta. Surfing on internet is a habit of some folks. It's a worldwide computer network, and there's interactive TV. We take telecommunications for granted these days. But there was a time when we were amazed at the technology of radio and TV. We would tune in to programs with a hometown flavor, and they were at the same time both magical and cozy.
Well, I suppose we had the first TV set in Temple, Georgia. We gave our mother and daddy a set as soon as they became available on the market. And I remember that we would have neighbors and friends who would come to our house. We'd fill the whole rooms, you know, with people who came to watch TV. Set it up theater style, you know, because everybody in town was so thrilled over having televisions. They'd come down to the house and watch it. So it was great fun having them. And, of course, eventually, you know, they got television sets of their own, but it was fun. We just enjoy all the programs, and it was just so wonderful, you know, back then, to think that you had television and all the variety shows and entertainment, everything. It was great.
WSB was Atlanta's first TV station, signing on in 1948. Jimmy Bridges remembers doing the first newscast, covered in pancake makeup and sporting a carnation.
Well, let's see. I was introduced by Walter Pascal, who was the news director of both radio and television. And as he introduced me, I said, "Thanks, Walter, and good evening, everybody." To scan those headlines briefly, and I inserted the headline news summary in there, ended with the following cue line: "Those are the top items tonight. Now let's look at the news in pictures." And that's where we had the drop cards with the pictures inserted in there. And some of the script is, and if you've been wondering where those tractors have been going, here's a partial answer. 4,500 of them going to Argentina in lots of 200 a week. And we got another card in. We didn't want to leave these things on long at a time. 5 seconds maximum, 3 seconds preferably, because they get static and just look blah. Here's the man who claims he is Jesse James. James Frank Dalton, he calls himself now. Reminiscing with the aged man is J.B. Browner of Atlanta, great-grandson of the man James says he slew. And like that, our weather will be generally fair and a little warmer. Cool, though, at night, with an expected low of 58 and a high tomorrow of 78. And that's the news in brief today.
I produced the first program, of course, that
WSB ever did, the inaugural program. After that, we experimented with doing virtually every kind of program that you see on television today. The first news programs done in the South on television were done on WSB. The early television newscasts, both locally and on networks, were principally those of a newscaster reading news in front of a camera. You didn't have access to a film that you could integrate into the program.
WSB Radio had signed on way back in 1922, not just a first for Atlanta, but for the entire South.
WSB.
Listeners really warmed up to the station.
And then, of course, even before television, we loved WSB. You know, we used to listen to the Farm and Home Hour and wonderful Ernest Rogers and Lambden Kay, who were quite a pair. Charlie Smith Gall and
Bob Van Camp, all those, and way back.
Hugh Ivey and Marcus Bartlett, who had the most melodious voice surely ever heard on WSB, and who could play the piano wonderfully, too.
This is Marcus Bartlett with the Johnson Sisters and Walter Herbert serenading you from our studios atop the Biltmore Hotel in Atlanta, Georgia.
I started playing piano in a band in 1926, and the band played on radio on the old Radio Owls show, 10:45 at night. Colonel Lambden Kay, who was then manager of the station, was the MC. He found out I could play piano and used to call me occasionally to come play for a soloist. So in 1930, they had one of the first commercials getting ready to go on the air for the Bookhouse Story people. And Colonel Kay called me and says, "Do you want to audition for it?" Now, the reason that he wanted me to audition, he figured that if I could play the piano and play the theme music, and if I could read the stories out of the storybooks, they had two people for the price of one.
Marcus was even more versatile than that. Inspired by New York's Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, he read the funny papers aloud. He did sports play-by-play. He interviewed movie stars who came to town, such as John Wayne and Don Amici, and musical celebrities like Kate Kaiser and Fred Waring.
Fred Waring and his original Pennsylvanians came here to do a program at the Roxy Theater. And in those days, we had very recently gotten our shortwave equipment to do remote controls. Waring himself was very cooperative and did a great interview with me. And he invited me to come backstage to see the show from that angle. And after that, we went back in his dressing room, and he demonstrated a new gizmo which he had just invented. It was called the Waring Blender.
Bob Watson hosted WSB's long-running late-night platter party and did his share of star-studded interviews.
Well, 2 times I had the pleasure of interviewing Bob Hope. The most unusual one was the day when his band leader, Skinny Ennis, failed to show for an interview schedule with me. So Bob Hope said, "Send me in. I'll be glad to take his place on the interview." So he was brought in. I was absolutely horrified because I had no questions for Bob Hope. And so I said, "I'm sorry, this is great, but I have no questions for you." And he said, "No problem." He said, "Just ask me the questions that you had prepared for Skinny Ennis." So I asked him those questions as though he were Skinny Ennis, and it was just hilarious because naturally everybody recognized Bob's voice.
In early TV, the on-air talent also had to wear different hats. For Paul Raymond, who later became general manager of WAGA, it even meant a cowboy hat.
I joined the station in February of 1955 as an announcer, and in those days, announcers were not really specialists. You were specialists depending on what was on your shift. And on my shift was news and sports and commercials, and on Saturday morning, a kid show where I was known as Pinto Paul. Someone out there may recall that, sponsored by Foremost Dairies. I think even the dairies are out of business. The concept of the program Pinto Paul was that I dressed as a cowhand and sat in front of a flat that looked like a Western set, and generally holding a carton of Foremost milk in my hand, and describe the movie of the day, which was either a Hopalong Cassidy or a Lash LaRue or some other unknown cowboys long since gone to that great western hill beyond. And we would then do the movie.
WERD was the first black-owned and operated station in the country. It was known as the Good Word station back then, broadcasting from Sweet Auburn Avenue. It was noted for blues, jazz, and gospel.
I had a group of singers that came on Sunday morning, and from 6:15 to 6:30, and we would sing gospel songs. And I would pray before we sing. And this was different in radio for black people because everybody come on, they start singing. And I've always believed in prayer. And I had a prayer, and then I would sing with my group, the Patterson Airs, for 15 minutes. And we had the highest rating in radio all day long on that radio station at 6:15 to 6:30 because of me being different. And that's been my success in my radio career, is being different.
Allie Pat recalls a favorite prank at the station.
I remember I put one on the program director one Saturday morning, and he wanted to kill me, but I was a little younger than he, and he didn't jump me because he wanted to. We made him think that there was somebody else on the phone, on the line that he was doing. He was doing a show, and we sneaked in the control room and talked in the earphones, and he asked a question, and we would answer him on the earphones, and he thought it was coming from the outside, and he blew up, man.
And in my day, they called me Jockey Jack. That was my name that I used on the air then. And they said, the jockey is here.
Jockey Jack was before me, and as a matter of fact, Jockey Jack taught me, and I'm a product of his. However, he liked the jazz, and of course I liked the blues.
Jockey Jack was famous for his sign-off at night.
And the white rug is down, and the deal is done. And this is your man, the jockey, getting ready to go off into Never Never Land. But I want all my little sugars to come on here and snuggle with me while I whisper into your little shell-like ear. Gone for now.
Of course, music was big on TV as well as radio. In fact, music was a downright necessity for a fledgling station that eventually became WXIA.
You know, in 11, there was really a funny thing. With no network till 3, and most of the other stations had some network, the staff band was nearly a necessity. Ray was a staff announcer, so we had a couple of shows a day that were sponsored totally, and they wanted a swing western type thing. So we put on the western garb. I had a couple of jackets with the fringe hanging off, and the same group that played the morning show did 2 shows of the Western Swing every day. And one time we were doing 2 hours and 45 minutes of live TV per day. We did that for over 2 years.
You may remember there was a variety of children's programming on television. Over at Channel 2, Don and Ruth Gilpin took care of the small fry with their marionettes and the Woody Willow show. And then there was Miss Boo, one of a kind, on Channel 11.
I was a witch, a thorough witch, inside and out. And I got lots of people who wrote letters saying, we don't like you using the word rat, which I thought was sort of strange. They kept me kind of brisk. They also said, don't tell the children or don't mention the idea that you're going to cook the children. That doesn't sound too good. They're probably right. It didn't sound too great. But I enjoyed doing it. And I guess the whole thing was so much fun. We had no idea of really what was going to happen on each show. Guess what we're going to do today? We are going to get in this big box. It's about 600 feet by 500 feet, and we're going to get every one of you all in it, and then we're going to close the top, and I'm going to take it to the mailbox and mail you away. And where you like to go, you can let me know, but Halloweensville, yeah, we'll go there together. You're going to have a good time. And I'll see to it, yeah.
Over on Channel 5 at various times, Mr. Pix, and Fire Chief Bob, and a real character. A fellow named George Ellis, who was a hit for kids of all ages.
Now, gentlemen of the orchestra, a fanfare, if you please. Thank you, that's very nice. And now a word to you young people in the audience. You young people of all ages. My name is Bistoink Dooley. Perhaps you've seen me on television. I hope you've seen me on television. I'm on every day with Dooley and Company, and then I'm on Friday evening with a big movie shocker. Yes.
There are several ways to measure the impact of broadcasting.
Wait a minute. Oh, well, hey, Officer Don.
I haven't seen you for years.
It's been a long time, Officer Don.
I didn't expect you to be here.
Well, I just thought I'd pop in and say hi.
Hi. You look ravishing.
Oh, I do, Officer Don?
Well, you look very nice. Your ears are still perky. Your eyes are still bright. Your nostrils are still flaming.
I just don't know what to say, Officer Don. Why, you look terrible. What happened to you?
You haven't changed, have
No,
you?
I guess I haven't, Officer Don.
I think we ought to be friends, Ord. You know, we've always been friends, and we'll be friends to the end.
That's right, Officer Don. Hey, by the way, will you lend me $10?
That's the end.
Oh, that sounds just like the stuff we used to do in the Popeye Club.
Yes, yes.
In fact, why don't we roll the tape and see it?
First, we take the tube. There we go. And we put it over the glass. Is that right?
That's right.
All
But
right.
wait a minute. That's right. Now.
Abracadabra! Okay.
Thank you.
Now what do we do?
Now you pull the tube up, and the fish will be in the glass.
All right, we'll pull the tube up and
the fish will be in there.
Or
The fish will...
there are no fish in there. Just a bunch of weenies or sausages or something. Orville, you did it again.
Well, before we were interrupted, I was saying there are many ways to measure the impact of broadcasting. The ratings only tell the numbers. We've got a couple of stories about that. Zernona Clayton, for example, remembers her early talk show on Channel 5, WAGA.
In doing political shows, it's kind of dull just to do the same repetitive things like interviewing the candidates, because they're on a lot. And I said, let's do something different. Let's invite the wives of the candidates, and let's see the other side of the candidates. And so the directors and the people thought that was a good idea. So we invited all the wives to come and said, what is that candidate really like? And it was really a very fun show. One of the questions I asked them among many was, what does your husband really like to eat? What's his favorite food? And they all gave me the answers. One of them, it was Rodney Cook's wife to be exact, Mrs. Cook said that her husband's favorite meal was black-eyed peas. And everybody gave their answers, but I saw her several years after that and continued to see her several years after that. She said, Zernona, we have realized the impact of your show. She said, right afterwards, we got so many bags of black-eyed peas because they saw it on the show.
In those earlier days, the media woods were not yet full of image consultants. Elmo Ellis went with substance over style when he hired Aubrey Morris as a reporter for WSB Radio.
I'm looking down the mountainside here. I talked to a friend of the groom. He says they are expected to be on their way up to the top by foot pretty soon.
Someone wrote Elmo and said, Dear Elmo, where did you get this guy Aubrey Morris? He sounds horrible. Fire him. And they attached a dime at the bottom of the postcard, said, P.S., this is to begin a fund, F-U-N-D, fund, to pay for elocution lessons for Aubrey Morris. Well, I came home and told my wife, Tira, that I was afraid I'd made the wrong choice in leaving the newspaper to go to radio. But then I gave it a second thought. I said, well, if it's all this bad, I'll build a radio career around the, shall we say, peculiar sound of my voice.
And Aubrey does have a distinctive delivery, as anybody who's ever heard him will agree. Aubrey became legendary on the air because if Aubrey said it, you could believe it. And so one day, we had a big snowstorm in Atlanta. And Aubrey got up before daylight and got on the air and said, folks, it's bad out there, don't get in your automobile. Stay at home. And people did stay at home.
Retail sales took a nosedive because nobody went shopping.
I was invited to a meeting with Mayor Hartsfield and Dick Rich and a lot of other city leaders, and they literally chewed me out for letting Aubrey Morris paralyze Atlanta.
Computers are common now in schools, even elementary schools, I understand. There was a time when we thought high-tech was the equipment in shop, or maybe the manual typewriters in typing class. There are over 100 high schools now in the metro Atlanta area. There was a time when there were just a handful of schools in Atlanta proper, and everybody you knew was either a classmate or an arch rival. It was a simpler world back then. Boys High dates way back to 1872. Boys High and Tech High schools were separate buildings, but then joined under one roof in the early 1900s. Commercial High was co-ed and split from Girls High around the same time period. These schools went through a lot of changes. Thousands of students graduated from them. Booker T. Washington was established in 1924. It was the first, and for a long time, the only high school in the Atlanta public system for black students. It is the only school that remains.
It was a very good school, I must say. The teachers were helpful. The building wasn't that bad. It was good. Our principal at that time was Dr. Harper, who was a hell of a guy. He and Cornell were running the school. They ran a good ship. We had good teachers who took time with us. And we had some great teachers like Mrs. Buchanan and Jefferson and, oh, I could name you a slew of them. Dr. X.L. Neal in chemistry. And my homeroom teacher at one year was Mrs. Hatcher, who was in home economics. And can you imagine me cooking with an apron on and all these kind of things that the girls were doing in home ec? We did those things at Washington High School, which taught us how to cook.
Boys High, Tech High, which were located together at 10th Street and Parkway Drive, now Charles Allen Drive. Commercial High, which was downtown, and Girls High, which was on Rosalia Street, out near Grant Park. So Boys High, Tech High, and Girls High had to be reached by trolley specials. And they used the older trolleys because they knew there was going to be some damage to these things. But they all came together at Whitehall and Alabama Street every afternoon.
Although these schools were designed to offer a choice of courses, the distinctions weren't always important to students.
I elected to go to Tech High. I'm not sure just why, except that probably more of the boys I was running around with then, I decided to go there. They did have some shop courses, cabinet making, blacksmithing, and so forth. I didn't go particularly for that, although I did do pretty well in cabinet making.
And of course, a few of us have memories of not being taught, but of doing the teaching. H.M. Huey remembers starting out with a new class at Boys High.
I announced to the boys, I told them my name. I said, I don't know you and you don't know me, but pretty soon we'll know each other. And so I want to rearrange your seating. I want to arrange you alphabetically because it will be easier. I can learn your names more quickly. And I said, as soon as I learn them, then we'll have a moving day, because as soon as I can look at you and call your name, I don't really care where you sit. Well, that seemed to be a pretty good start, except when we got through shuffling around, we were short 2 boys. They'd gotten out the back door, and I had not seen them.
He went to the principal for assistance and made sure he got it.
So I walked across the hall, told him what had happened, who the two boys were. And I said, now, Mr. Smith, if they're not back in my class in 10 minutes, they're not coming back. Imagine the audacity of a young, brash teacher telling the principal that. He chuckled in his usual way, and he said, ho, 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 do you know who so-and-so is? I said, frankly, Mr. Smith, I don't know, and I don't give a damn. But if he's going to be in my class, he's going to be back there in 10 minutes. Well, in 10 minutes, they were both back. I don't know to this day where Mr. Smith found them. I guess he knew their hangout.
Some of our memories center on the faculty and administrators who worked so hard and cared so much.
Miss Jessie Muse was our principal, and she had been the principal of Girls High for many, many years. And she was a wonderful person and very stately and just a lovely lady. And when she would walk in the hall, you would just almost freeze because her presence, you knew that you couldn't run and you couldn't be loud and you couldn't carry on craziness. And but there was much order in the school. Girls High was the most difficult school, but when you went there, you knew that you'd be going to college because you had such a good education. And most of us, the first year of college we'd already had, so it made that first year of college very easy. And I can't say that Girls High was lots of fun because we had such difficult teachers and it was hard, but in the long run, I appreciated that. It was good for us.
A lot of high school memories involve personal triumphs of various types.
The 1939 game, Tech High was heavily favored, but being the sports editor, I thought I knew more than most people, which I really didn't. But anyway, I've made a prediction in my column that Boys High was going to win that game 14-6. I had previously interviewed Coach Doyle the week before about the game, and he was predicting Boys High was going to lose by 2 or 3 touchdowns, you know. And I said, well, Coach, I'm going to put it in my column, and I think we're going to win 14-6. He said, Norman, have at it. So I did, and lo and behold, the final score that year after that ball game with 20,000 people packed into Ponce de Leon Park was Boys High 14, Tech High 6. I was a hero for about a month.
Well, it was only a game. And whatever happened, excitement and school spirit remain with us forever.
With a vivo, with a vivo, with a vivo, vivo, bum. Trying to get a rat trap bigger than a cat trap, bum, bum. Hannibal, cannibal, sis, boom, ba. Tech High, rah, rah, rah.
But there were some memories we'd like to put behind us.
We just hated phys ed classes because 3 times a week we would have to dress out in big old black bloomers and a white shirt. And we just all did everything we could to get out of taking gym at Girls High. We just hated it.
We learned lessons from the books, of course, but that wasn't all. We learned lessons about life, too. For one young scholar, one of those lessons was win a few, lose a few.
And I had a high school teacher, Mr. Barron, I think was his name, who gave me a 99 in history. And he said, now, Garrett, no student's perfect. I can't give you 100, but you didn't miss anything, so I'm giving you a 99. But I'm not going to tell you what I made in some other subjects, such as algebra and so forth.
Atlanta's a great town for sports. I don't have to tell you that. We have the Falcons and the Braves and the Hawks. We have a couple of pennants under our belt. We're host of the Olympics. And here's this great new shiny dome. But there was a time before professional sports in Atlanta when sports fans still had something to cheer about. There were those ancient football rivalries in the crisp, cool days of fall. And we got to cheer for our favorite teams. The Georgia Tech University of Georgia game is still a great favorite today, but back when championship and bowl invitations might depend on the outcome, it was a truly momentous occasion.
Well, I wish that the Georgia Tech game was as big as it was at the time that I first started coaching. In all due respects to our wonderful professional teams, the biggest show in town was the Georgia Tech game.
When Tech got out of the conference, which made the game a non-conference game, that took a little luster off of it. But what really hurt it was the stupid NCAA they started giving out the bowl invitations earlier and earlier in the month of November. So now all of a sudden you have two schools playing a non-conference game at the end of the year. It's not a conference game for either one of them. The game can't figure in anybody's championship or even a piece of a championship, and the bowl bids are all out.
When Tech and Georgia played, it was as if Grant Field became a giant magnet for Atlantans. And even those who were underwhelmed by some of the conditions there could find themselves moved by the sight of the stadium because of their role in the great rivalry.
I used to look upon Grant Field as being old and dark and dank, and the tunnels, to me, were crummy. The long ramp was bad, and we all used to curse the old elevator. It was hard to get up to the press box, and the press box itself seemed so small, and the bathroom facilities were so bad, and you lined up outside of the bathroom. And I guess these are dumb things to recollect on, you know, and thank God Grant Field has finally gone through what everybody went through, and they've rebuilt and they've remodeled, and now it's really something.
Of course, many of the Tech-Georgia games were played between the hedges in Athens at Sanford Stadium. Whatever the locale, the games created a tradition famous for its fever pitch and close scores. The 1978 game is perhaps the epitome of these vintage Tech-Georgia contests.
I think the one that I remember, strangely enough, Georgia won the ball game. It was 29-28, the game over, that's the most thrilling game, I think, of the Tech-Georgia series. It was over at Athens, and Tech led at one point in the ball game 20-0 in the first half, and they led 20-7 at halftime. And that's what the days we had Eddie Lee Ivory, who was a sensational runner. And from then on, we got a good lead. And then Eddie Lee got hurt in the second half. And then Georgia just kept pecking away. We had a 101-yard return of a kickoff by Drew Hill of the Atlanta Falcons. And we had so many exciting plays in that ball game. But Georgia came off the floor to win the game 29-28. But it was a thriller right down to the last minute of the game.
It was a game that had everything you could think of. It was a game that had an onside kick. It was a game that had a punt return for a touchdown. It was a game that had a kickoff return for a touchdown. It was a game that it went down to the wire, and we had to go for two twice. You name some big, exciting play in football, it was probably in that ball game against Georgia Tech in 1978, and it was 29, I think, to 28.
Grant Field certainly didn't have a monopoly on college football in Atlanta. Herndon Stadium at Morris Brown College hosted many a game. It had its red-hot rivalry, the Morris Brown-Clark matchup, another great tradition on Thanksgiving weekends. For journalist Hal Lamar, one cliffhanger stands out in particular.
I never will forget there was a Thanksgiving game, Clark and Morris Brown. Both of the teams had come in with impressive records. And the winner of the Thanksgiving game was going to win the conference championship in the SIAC. It went down almost literally to whoever scored in the final second. And I remember, I'll never forget, being on the Morris Brown side. I'd come out of the press box because we figured with a few seconds to go, the game was over. Clark was behind, but Clark was driving. By the time I got down to the sideline, Clark had the ball on its own 7-yard line. And a little fellow by the name of Standifer, who was a little short quarterback, wore number 2, drove the team all the way down 93 yards. And I followed him from the 7-yard line all the way down the sidelines till he scored. And and I thought at first that maybe Clark had won the game. Morris Brown took the kickoff, brought it back 81 yards, scored a field goal, and won the game with seconds off the clock. It just tore the whole place up. Everybody was just in an uproar.
For many years, Herndon was also the site of games for Atlanta's predominantly black high schools.
People used to laugh at the field and say it was raggedy and that they didn't keep the field up well, but you got to consider this field took a beating. You had high school teams playing here. All 3 of the AU Center schools had to play here at their home fields. So the school took a beating.
Herndon hosted many other events, too. It was an important institution, not just to sports fans, but to the black community as a whole.
Mahalia Jackson performed here. Ray Charles did a concert that resulted in a live album. You're saddened because you know that there's a lot of history that goes into this facility and all the things that happen here.
Morris Brown is getting a new stadium. It's clearly needed and richly deserved. But the physical disappearance of Herndon won't affect its position in Atlanta's history and its place in many Atlantans' hearts.
You want to sort of reach out and grab a piece of this concrete and take it with you. I think I will when they start tearing it up.
Well, there's no lack of entertainment in Atlanta. It's literally all over the map. We're at the Lakewood Amphitheater, for example, a massive complex. And there are other venues for entertainment. There's the Fox Theater and the Roxy Theater. And in parks, there's Piedmont Park and Chastain Park. And there's the Civic Center and the Memorial Arts Center. The list could go on. But it wasn't always that way. At one time, there was one hall that had it all, and that was the Municipal Auditorium. From the beginning, way back in 1909, you just couldn't pigeonhole the Municipal. It started out as part auditorium and part armory. Down through the years, it hosted everything.
When you went to the opera, everybody was just, they were just so dressed up. They were too dressed up to sit down, but they did anyhow. And they had the box seats, and you could tell who paid more for their fare because they were dressed in finery, you know, big furs and glittery pocketbooks and so forth and so on. And you could also tell the ones that knew the language in which they were singing because they did more laughing than anybody else.
I'll never forget the time Arthur Rubinstein came to play the first piano concerto of Tchaikovsky with the Atlanta Symphony. And Rubinstein was a tiny little guy, but he came out on the stage and he sat down at the piano. And the Tchaikovsky concerto starts with the whole horn section, all four horns going beam, bum, bum, bum. And then the piano plays a big chord. And when Rubinstein played a chord, he played a chord. And he didn't just sit in his seat. His whole bottom would rise out of the seat. And so we went beam, bum, 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 chunk, beam, bum, 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 boom. And whoever had set the piano, who brought the piano out, had failed to set the locks on the wheels. So with that second chunk, the piano, it was such a powerful hit that the piano rolled down the footlights. And Rubinstein jumped up out of his seat, scared, with a frantic look on his face, and the whole concert stopped right then and there.
I started having anniversaries at the City Auditorium that holds 6,000 people, and we turned them away every time. I mean, every time. And it was promoted by the late Herman Nash. He was the promoter. He presented the first anniversary that I had at the City Auditorium. He said, Herman Nash presents Brother Esmond Patterson's anniversary. And I don't know the exact year it was, but we used to bring the groups in town like the late Sam Cooke, the Mighty Clouds of Joy, the Dixie Hummingbirds, the late C.L. Franklin, and his daughter Aretha Franklin, and a little midget he had with him named Sammy. And they all would come to this auditorium, and Aretha was so little at the time, we used to have to put her up on the stage, and she was right there with her daddy.
The acoustics were awful. It was a round, circular building, and the sound just bounced around in there. If you didn't hear it the first time it came off the stage, you just wait, you'll hear it 3 or 4 more times before it's over. I started doing one-nighters, which is as entertainers travel, you make a deal with them and they would come, and we would put them in the Municipal Auditorium. At that time, that was the only place in Atlanta to do a show. Shows like Alice Cooper, Leon Russell, Led Zeppelin played the auditorium, acts like that.
Sometimes the Municipal made history. There were one-of-a-kind events there, like Muhammad Ali's comeback fight against Jerry Quarry in 1970.
So you're busy looking around before the fight started. You go, oh, look at that, oh, look at him, look at her. black and whites together. And the limousines, I mean, all the limousines were long. I mean, they were just lined up and letting people out. It was a grand affair. And then when Ali entered, oh, the excitement was thunderous. The mood, I mean, it was deafening. People cheered and hollered and screamed so till it was just blowing your drums of your ear, but you knew you were there and caught up in the moment of excitement.
Well, the first time I came to Atlanta, actually, was in 1939 when we brought the roller derby into Atlanta. As I recall, I believe we rented the entire auditorium for $50 a day, and that included Taft Hall, where they served their dinners and meals, and backstage where they all lived in the dressing room. So it was sort of a complete deal, and I can remember that back in those days, of course, you could attend for 10 cents and a Coca-Cola bottle cap. We brought the first ice show to Atlanta in 1946. That was Holiday on Ice. In those days, they would have to make ice, as they say, and all the pipes were strewn over the prairie somewhere in Kansas. So we were up to 3 or 4 days before the show. They were welding them, trying to get everything together. The second year, the ice machine wasn't working, and it was having a little bit of trouble. Back in those days, you know, it wasn't perfected as it is today. And so we called in one of those ice-making machines that was spraying ice, and of course, naturally, we wouldn't want the public to know this, but the manager of the auditorium thought it was fascinating, and I believe it was on the front page of the Atlanta newspaper showing how we were spraying ice on the floor to make ice for the ice show.
I had a beautiful Dalmatian that I had purchased from Fritz Orr, and he promised me he was going to be a great bench dog. His name was Calico Bo. I thought that was very appropriate for a spotted, old-timey dog. And he did very well in the ring, but when his turn was over, he was very unhappy, so I took him up into the balcony, and he sat up there, and he went, "Ooh," and everybody in Atlanta could hear this piercing screaming. I was so embarrassed. That was the end of my show career for many years.
I remember when you could walk along outside that building and get the smell of the elephants and the other animals after a performance by the circus. The next night, the circus smell might still be there while the ballet performed. I remember one time when the conductor of the Boston Pops Orchestra, Arthur Fiedler, when he came to Atlanta, he raised his baton. For a rehearsal, I'd gone down to interview him. He raised his baton, started 2 or 3 bars of music, and then signaled for the orchestra to stop, looked around, this barn. And of course, that was what Atlanta had back then.
With a vivo, with a vivo, with a vivo, vivo, bum. Johnny got a rat trap bigger than a cat trap. Bum, bum. Hannibal, cannibal, sis, boom, ba. Tech guy, rah, rah, rah.
Memory was once described as the way we can have roses even in winter. We hope you've enjoyed the roses we've picked for you on this stroll through Lost Atlanta. I'm Don Kennedy. Thanks for joining us.
Well, where else but on Georgia Public Television are you going to see Franklin Garrett do a cheer from Tech High?
What a wonderful moment. It's right there on videotape. We are so thankful that we were able to produce this program for all of you. If you've enjoyed it, now is your opportunity to show your appreciation by going to the telephone and giving us a call and becoming a member. I remember going to the Municipal Auditorium on a couple of occasions. When I first came to Atlanta, I saw a John Denver concert there. In fact, I think I heard that John Denver concert about 3 times that night with the voices echoing and knocking off the walls in the Municipal Auditorium. I also saw a Muhammad Ali fight there. I'll never forget that. In fact, I had a puppy dog that I named Ali, and I will always remember that. So if you have fond memories of Atlanta and you want to share them with us, call in right now. I can assure you, you will not get a busy signal because no one has called in yet. You could be the first one to call in and say, I love that program. I really enjoyed it. And you see all those names going by? Well, those are all the folks who worked on it. Judy Cohen and Rogene Bailey and Rick Westaway and lots more people. Liz Hornsby, wonderful.